Well, I'm about to tell you how I place my horizontal hives around my property, but I feel like I'm being watched. I'm a little nervous. The show must go on. Hey guys, Elizabeth, the curly-haired country gal here. Here in my first year of beekeeping, between Dr. Leo's workshop and Keeping Bees with a Smile and Keeping Bees in Horizontal Hives, I've gleaned a lot of information about where to place your hives. So today I'm going to tell you what I've learned so far about how to place your hives and where to place your hives, and in that I'm going to talk about why you do that. Let's do this thing. So one of the first things that I picked up really quickly from the Lay-Ins treatment-free beekeeping Facebook group was that if you ask one question, you're going to get 10 different answers. So there are some general principles that work most of the time in most cases, but just know that if you ask different people, you'll probably get different answers. So for the how to place your hives, there's a bunch of different options here. Some people will make metal stands, some people make wood stands, some people just use cement blocks like what I have, and I'll show you in a second. And in the Lay-Ins group, somebody even showed a picture of somebody who took toilets and turned them upside down and put their hives on top of toilets on the toilet stand, which is pretty funny. So it doesn't really seem to matter what you put it on, and it doesn't really seem to matter that much how high off the ground it is. Most people say at least 12 or 13 inches is good, but more like 18 inches is really helpful to keep skunks out. But what I kind of gathered was that it's more to do with the beekeeper's comfort than it is to do with the bees, because the bees would prefer to be 10 feet up in the air anyway. Now, Dr. Leo at his workshop did mention that some people, it may have been in Alaska, I'm not sure, somewhere where there's a lot of bears, some people keep bees by putting their hives on a pole with a platform on top of the pole, and that's to bear-proof it so the bears can climb up the pole but they can't go across the overhang. So that's a pretty creative way to do it, but a pretty inconvenient way for the beekeeper. I have a guest. Hi. How are you? So all of my hives are on cement blocks. Here I have it on an 8-inch tall block and a 4-inch tall block, so it's 12 inches off the ground, and on some of them it's on 2 8-inch tall blocks. Now the other thing that you want to keep in mind, especially if you live in a wet climate like I do, which I gleaned from the Lay-Ins group, is that you're going to want to have a board in between your hive and the cement blocks, because apparently moisture kind of leaches through the cement blocks more so than other materials, and so it's going to just ruin the bottom of your hive faster in a wet climate unless you put some sort of board in between it. So I don't have that on these yet, but I need to do that because I think we get an average of around 50 inches of rainfall a year. Hey you! Yeah, you! Thanks so much for watching my video, I appreciate it. Hey, if you enjoyed it or learned something from it, can you just like it down below? Thanks! And then when you're talking about where to place your horizontal hives, of course there's many options, but if possible, it's nice to spread them out at least 100 feet. At the workshop, Dr. Leo mentioned some studies that Seeley did where he had two sets of colonies with identical genetics, and one was put in an apiary within pretty close proximity, and one was spaced out by at least 100 feet. Now, I'm having a hard time remembering what the percentages were, but I think he said that 0% of the hives survived when they were in close proximity, but 30% of them survived when they were spaced out by 100 feet. So don't quote me on that, but the point was that there was a much greater rate of success when they were spread out. And the reason for that is because if they're really close in proximity, it's much easier for the bees to drift, and drifting is just accidentally going to the wrong hive. But if they're farther apart, that's less likely to happen. That's also why it's important to decorate your hives or put some sort of markings on the hives that are unique to each hive. So the paintings like this aren't just aesthetic, which is great because I'm a very practical person, so when beauty is also practical, that's great for me. Because Dr. Leo explained how bees' eyes aren't like ours. They're very, I wanted to say globular, but they're very dome-like, and they see things differently. So they don't see things the way that we do, but they do see intersections and branches. And so he recommended, you don't have to go crazy and do a painting like this, but even just something as simple as 3 horizontal lines or 3 vertical lines, or an A or a V, something with kind of sharp edges, the bees will be able to distinguish and know that that's home. Or something where there's a high contrast between black and white, because, fun fact, Something Dr. Leo talked about at the training was that bees are actually capable of turning off their color receptors. They have this acute sense of smell, and they go and collect this fragrant pollen and nectar that they're storing to bring back to the hive, and that can be a little bit overwhelming to your senses. So on the way back, once they are loaded down with pollen in their pollen sacs, they can actually flip off their color receptors and just see black and white, so that it kind of cuts down on all the sensory input that they're getting. Now, I know it's not possible for everybody to spread out their apiary, to spread out the hives in their apiary by at least 100 feet. So if you do have them in kind of a smaller area, one recommendation is to never put them in a straight line, again, to prevent that drifting, and so to orient them different ways. Now, the last thing with where to place your hives, I have some conflicting beliefs on this. I was helped a couple weeks ago by the suburban sodbuster, Monty, who brought a split colony that we installed, which you can check out the videos for, and we converted a Langstroth hive to a lay-ins hive. And he actually recommended getting the hives that I had placed in partial shade out of the shade. I intentionally tried to put all my hives in the shade, and he said that it was because hive beetles tend to flourish more in the shade as opposed to the sunshine. So I'm a little torn, because at Dr. Leo's apiary, some hives were in full sun and some hives were in the shade right underneath a tree. He lives in a really forested area, and so my thought was, okay, I want to try to get shade so that they're not too hot. So I think part of me needs to learn more about bees and trust bees to be able to cool down their hives more, because part of me believes that, and part of me is like, no, I gotta help them out by putting them in the shade. So I have this one underneath this peach tree. There's not a ton of shade provided by this peach tree, but it will have some shade. And then the sun and moon hive is underneath an evergreen tree over there, and then the freedom hive is underneath a willow tree, or at least off to the side a little bit. So I think I'm gonna leave them there for now, but if I seem to consistently have problems with the hives, that might be the first thing to change, is just to relocate them into full sun. So I applaud you for starting your natural beekeeping journey, and I'm really excited to start mine, so I hoped it helped to have some insight into how and where to place your horizontal hives. Hey, drop me a comment and let me know where you're placing your hives, and if I missed anything, feel free to let me know. Bye.